The best storyteller you'll ever meet is the one person you've known the longest. It's yourself. I remember being a kid and the simplest stick, the most boring pebble, could bring me the most joy. The stick became a master sword and the pebble became a gold coin, all because of my imagination. As we age, things naturally change, and all of this by now we're all used to. On top of everything, as gamers, we tend to dance to music no one else can hear. We are particularly good at using our imaginations to be creative, to build stories in entire game worlds that aren't even part of our screen, but we convince ourselves it's really existing outside of our screen, to dream about it throughout the day when we're not playing. We are dancing to a whole different style of music than people who don't play games really are. I mean, every aspect of a video game is a digital canvas for our imagination to paint many pictures onto. Now, I like gaming, I love it even, especially considering my channel is all about it, but even I couldn't help but admit that every video game is actually very boring. Now, when it comes to childhood and playing with those simple sticks, the twigs, the simplest pebbles, when it comes to all of that, there were so many times as a kid when I would just be in those woods, essentially creating an entire world out of those sticks and those coins, trading the coins for a more powerful weapon that then I could fight my cousin with. And the interesting thing is what I'm doing with video games right now, what we're doing with video games, is not so different at all. When you walk through the open, cozy, barren landscapes of Skyrim, or when you're hunting monsters and making countless moral decisions in Witcher 3, or even when you're on a crazy zombie-filled quest to save Ashley in Resident Evil 4, you're still actually bored. Whoa, face reveal, that's right. Even in those games you're playing the most, those classic games that we all have so much fun with, you are actually bored at your core. I had to know what the internet would say about what the most boring game ever was. This is all in my quest to determine whether I really was actually bored playing games, because what I was starting to realize was kind of wild. What I discovered was, after Googling the most boring game ever, a game called Desert Bus popped up. Now, Desert Bus is kind of a silly game. It's a compilation of mini-games by Penn & Teller, the magician. So they made a video game, a mini-game compilation back in the day, called Penn & Teller's Smoke and Mirrors. But Desert Bus is a game where the player drives a bus along a straight road, basically 4 hours, all to earn 1 point. Really what this game represents that I find so fascinating. This game, Desert Bus, was, by Google's opinion, the most boring game ever made. You know, what really makes something boring? What is boring really? It's an absence of fun. It's an absence of meaning. When many people think boring, they think watching paint dry. They think sitting in an empty room. They think nothing. Nothing's happening. You're bored because there's nothing interesting you. There's nothing really happening. And such is the case with video games, isn't it? Dun, dun, dun. When I start to think about what the most boring video games I can possibly think of are, it comes down to games like Minecraft, games like Power Wash Simulator, any simulator game. Comes down to Stardew Valley, the farming simulators. It comes down to those type of games where I'm either doing something I could be doing in real life and I'm not choosing to do that, so I'm playing a game, or it's a game that really there's nothing going on in. You know, all these games do have things going on for them, but it's nothing crazy. It doesn't have the typical landscape of a story. There's no beginning, middle, and end to it. There's just you existing in a fake world, a digital world. Yet, Minecraft, it's considered one of the best, at least most influential games ever, and Stardew Valley is the highest rated game on Steam. So what is it about these boring games, these traditional, I would say even the majority of gamers would admit there's some boring elements to these. What is it about these boring games that capture our attention? You know, when we talk about boredom, we're talking about the absence of fun, the absence of something meaningful to do, and these games are offering not much in those categories. These games allow people's imaginations to do what they will. They allow people to create entire worlds in their heads, just like if they're reading a book. You know, that's the distinction between something like reading a book and watching a movie or playing a game. There's no visual aspect. And when it comes to a game like Stardew Valley, you are seeing faces, you're reading text. The amount of imagination that goes into making a game fun like that, it requires that you suspend so much of your imagination, that you fill in the gaps. This is true of so many other games. Specifically with Stardew Valley, when you're not in Pelican Town, nothing's happening. There is actually really no existence of Pelican Town. When you are on your farm, you're thinking about what the people in town are doing. Yes, they have their routes. Yes, they have their specific schedules and their specific tasks on specific days. They are not actually existing as you know them to be when you're interacting with them. They're still just sprites, but your imagination is bringing them to life. So many times in this world, this life of ours, it's hard to allow our imaginations to express themselves. There are so many times when we're just sitting around and we feel the need to distract ourselves with our phone, to turn on a TV show, or in this case, to play a game, because our imaginations, there's so much going on. We want to avoid some anxiety. We don't want to think about whatever responsibilities we have. There are so many reasons why we might go to these alternatives, and specifically what these boring games allow us to do is have an imagination free from actual concerns. Free from actual worries. It's why simulators are so interesting, isn't it? Because you are doing these tasks. You are washing things when you know for a fact you still have to wash down your kitchen countertop. Or it's time to vacuum, but you can find it in yourself to power wash and simulate that in a game. Same thing when it comes to farming simulators, flight simulators, all of these. What they're allowing you to do, they're giving you the mental space to create and do a task while you're able to think and to exist. But it's inherently boring. A huge trend right now, and I feel like it's been going on for a few years, is the actual realization that we should allow ourselves to be bored. We should free ourselves from the confines of our phones, of distraction, because back in the day we used to be bored so much, especially as children. That's where the sticks become swords. That's where the pebbles become gold coins. It's when I was bored. Now, I played games as a kid. I had books to read. I had TV shows I could watch. But it was those moments when everyone around me, the adults, said, no, go walk out there in the woods, go hang out, see what happens. And I created an entire world of my own. And video games rely on that same concept. It's why cozy games are cozy. It's why they're good for us to play when we're tired and exhausted. It's why so many people in their lives can only afford to play cozy games, mentally afford, is because they actually give our brain the time to exist and to imagine. It's fun. Whereas if I play a game that's action-packed, like Call of Duty or Fortnite, something that's really heavy, an open-world RPG that's very story-based, JRPG, anything that requires a lot of intense paying attention and movement, those are mentally taxing on us because we are still not getting that time to check in, to recharge, and to imagine. We have to be bored. And that's the crux of this, really, is that just because a video game is boring doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Boredom is not a bad thing. And that's something that I wanted to address in this video. Being bored is fun if you do it right. It's easy for me to say right now because I'm not bored. I understand that. But being bored is the reason why cozy games are so popular. When we start to look at the most exciting games, you could go so many ways with this. We could talk about the Battle Royale games. We could talk about Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto. You could go into horror with Resident Evil. Whichever angle you want to take, these will get your heart racing. They'll get you excited in some way. They'll get you really feeling good. You might think they are not boring. You might think that these games, no, there's no way Fortnite can be boring. There's no way Call of Duty can be boring. Now, there is really no game that has no downtime, really. So you could argue, yeah, those moments when you're not actually in action, well, of course you're going to be bored. Well, that's not only what I'm talking about. It's the entire game experience itself where you are really bored. When you're playing through Fortnite or Call of Duty Warzone, what we're doing is imagining something. We're still imagining. We're imagining a world where we've just won. We're imagining what it feels like if us and the boys, the whole squad, we're winners. And how good that would feel. There are so many times in Fortnite where you're playing, and once you get down to the final 5, you're not really even thinking about anything besides what it would feel like to win. You're skipping 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd. All you can think about is number 1 because you're so close to it. These games where you're so excited by that idea, you are still bored. All the downtime walking around, you're having those moments of total nothingness. And those are the majority of that game, are walking around with almost nothing happening. Whether you're waiting in a lobby, you're loading up the game, and the time in the actual matches where you're not doing much of anything at all besides imagining what it would be like if you were to be doing something. You're talking about something like a horror game like Resident Evil, Dead Space. All you're doing is imagining. Your mind is on edge, the adrenaline's pumping, your fight or flight's going. At the end of the day, when you're playing a horror game, when I seek out a horror game and I play it, I realize something. And it's that nothing else quite gets me as hyped up. Nothing is quite as exciting as playing a horror game. Now, for other people that will differ. But what horror games offer us are the most exciting, the least boring experience in a game. Where the boredom lies is in the fact that our imaginations are carrying the entire weight of the experience. Think about why horror games are scary. When it comes down to it, it's because we're listening to the music, we're being subtly influenced by everything that the developers intended, of course. They get their credit. It's our brains that are convincing us there's a monster around the corner, convincing us that what's chasing us is actually scary, when in fact it's not. If you zoom out, take a second, and you look, it's all just on a small monitor or a TV screen. It's not scary at all, but it's our imagination telling us that it is, convincing us that we are not bored, that we are really experiencing this. It's drawing us out of that boredom, but that's what's so crazy about it, is that when we turn off the game, we realize nothing really happened. There was no experience to be had. In fact, it was just us distracting ourselves, convincing ourselves we were really in there for a moment. Now, I feel like here it's pertinent again to say they're a blast. I don't say any of this to denigrate them, but I just find it fascinating. I find co-op gaming to be especially interesting because I would argue that boredom is that is a real experience. You're bonding with someone, you're creating a connection. Even if it's an artificial experience, you're still forming a bond with that other human who is not artificial. So there is an actual lack of reality. The imagination is not the crux of the experience. I just think that when it comes down to it, when the crux of your experience relies on imagination, that imagination is doing is really masking a boredom that once you're turning off the Xbox, the PlayStation, the actual desktop, whatever you're turning off, the imagination reveals that it was only masking that boredom for the amount of time that artificial experience lasted. It's the same thing with reading, of course, same thing with a movie. It's really about what you learn while you were experiencing that imagination. That's why it's not invaluable. That's why it's not a waste of time. I've made multiple videos about why video games are not wastes of time. And one important reason why is because you are learning stuff about yourself, even if it's an artificial experience. You're learning how to go through a trial in Dark Souls. You're learning how to sit with yourself in a game like Breath of the Wild. Even if these things are just masks for the boredom you were feeling prior to playing them potentially, what it really comes down to is it's not invaluable, and that being bored is good and being bored is healthy. When we end up playing games for too long, when we burn ourselves out on gaming, it's because we allowed ourselves to become bored while playing the game. We allowed our imagination to run out, and thus the boredom crept into the artificial experience, shattering the entire thing. When we play a bad game and doesn't connect with us, because we're bored from the start, we didn't connect with it, it didn't hit our imagination in that way where it allowed it to catapult us into the actual experience we were believing in. You know, this game right here, this game really took me for a ride. totally stole my imagination in a way that a game hasn't in a long time. I'm talking like 13 hours a day, but every time after I turned off that switch, I still felt the same thing though. I realized it had all been an artificial experience and it hadn't done anything to really conquer that feeling of boredom. Now that's a much larger question. What stems boredom? What stops boredom? Video games stop it for a time. Everything is only a temporary fix to boredom, I suppose, but that's healthy. Because as I said, boredom is a good thing. Where we learn about ourselves, where we become creative. It's where ideas for videos like this come from. If I was constantly distracting myself, I'd never even think every video game is boring at its heart. A weird idea like this would never come up organically if I was always listening to podcasts and consuming media and playing games all the time. If I didn't walk around, if I didn't meditate every morning, if I didn't have these experiences, such ideas would not pop into my head, and some of everyone's ideas would never be there. Of course you can gain inspiration, but when it comes down to it, being bored is good, and every video game being boring is a good thing. It's a part of the experience. In the end, every video game is actually boring. Every video game is boring because it's not real, because it's relying on our imagination. Thank you for watching. See you next time. We'll see what ideas stem from my future boredom, and we'll go from there. Hoping to do some more lives in the future, so see you guys. Peace.